Welcome back to Inside College Basketball now with Jon Rothstein. Pleased to be joined by Purdue head coach Matt Painter. And Matt, welcome. And let's get right now to the most important topic. And quite frankly, you've ignored it in all of your media availability so far this preseason. Are you rearranging Purdue's practice schedule around when the Cubs play?
I am actually not. Even though I went to a game last week, I am not. But I do try to get one in there if I can.
Now, how did the feeling of taking Purdue to the Final Four a couple of years ago compare to the feeling of when you watched the Cubs win the World Series?
Oh yeah, very similar, to be honest with you.
Wow.
Just in terms of like something that you want to happen. Obviously, it didn't happen for us. We got really close, and obviously the Cubs winning it in 2016 is when you're a fan, for a long time. You know how the Purdue fans feel, like as a Cub fan, but it's also one of those things for us as back to Purdue is just when you walk off the court and you have somebody like a Zach Edey, you wonder when you're going to get another bite at the apple,
right?
And you got to do a lot of things between now and the end of the season, but you feel good about the team that we had last year. The loss to Daniel Jacobsen, hurt us. There's no question around that. But that was also on me to have more firepower. And I think we have enough firepower this year. We got to get some breaks. We got to play well. We got to defend and rebound, all those good things. But we feel good about going into the season.
Well, let's get to your team, which you've obviously referenced right now. What is it like to return in this climate 86% of your scoring from a team that went to the Sweet 16 the year prior?
Yeah, for us, it's we've really just stayed kind of on the blueprint, like how everybody used to do it. We've just stayed that way. I think there's, we're not the only school that's doing that, but we just kind of wait till the spring, and if there's need, then we get into the portal. If there's not need, then we stick with development and getting better. And it's a little bit of a catch-22. If you win a big game, someone says, "Oh, they really develop players," and if you lose, they say they should have gotten the portal.
Right.
So like you're stuck, but it's worked for us, and that's something that it actually excites people in the portal, that when we do start talking with them, because they know, we're not trying to fill the roster. This is need, you're trying to get all the pieces there. And so it's really helped us just to kind of stay the course with it. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it's kind of that corporate DNA. You want a player driven, team, a player coach team. You want that. And I think we have that right now, but we also want to continue that. And that's hard. It's hard to sustain. And the one thing that we don't try to do is box ourselves in. Like we got to keep doing, what's best for our program. If that's to continue with development, great. If that means going into the portal, then so be it. But everyone's looking for that balance.
No question, but the best teams in college basketball are the teams that are able to bring back some players and develop a core year after year. How has Purdue done such a good job and been so effective at the retention piece?
Yeah, well, I think more than anything, we just haven't lost our starters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kind of blows my mind across the country is when I see somebody have success in a system, they play well, they're all conference, and then now they want to move.
Right.
And I understand the financial piece of it, but also if you're going to be a pro and you're going to grow, now it's really trying to get to that second contract in the NBA if you want to get down to it, if it's that important to you. But that kind of bewilders me when you see people across the country have success with a particular coach and a particular system, and then they move again. They're making it hard, on themselves. And our guys have been able to stay that have started. We have lost guys, but it's more guys that come off the bench or don't play as much.
I remember talking to you, during the pandemic, and, the obviously in vogue topic was immediate eligibility for transfers. And, we got to a point where everybody said, well, if we can just get past waivers and it's a one-time transfer, we might have some stability. And then when NIL came, We obviously heard that if we just get to the House settlement, there'll be some stability. What is it like as a coach to proceed in this environment and try and build a roster and maintain a program with so much uncertainty?
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say. You stole my word. There's still uncertainty, and that's what there's. You want common ground. I think anybody wants common ground. Like, tell us the rules, we'll abide by the rules, and we can go forward. But when you don't know, and there's a lot of things that get out there that you don't know whether it's true, it's not true. How are you just kind of navigating the waters? And I think everybody's doing it a little bit differently. So hopefully in time we can get where there's that stability. But there's just different with revenue sharing in different leagues, and there's just a lot of differences out there right now in terms of what you can provide for guys, what you can't provide for guys, and that's what we keep going back to our own administration and just saying, like, let's just get to the rules. But it's hard. The thing that we felt was going to get thrown out is the collectives, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Right.
But I don't know. And that's the uncertainty that you're talking about right there. Like, we just, like, what's the rules? Like, what really is it? But just the common ground of everybody has to abide by the same things. Not everybody from every different conference is doing different things. So now we know how to go forward. They're obviously not going to go to the 5-5 right now. And that was a kind of a big scuttlebutt there for about a month, with coaches out on the road talking about that, and they're not in place to do that right now. They might do it in the future, but that's at least good to kind of to hear that, because that's a big thing in recruiting. Like, if you got a guy that's coming back versus a guy that's not going to come back, and getting them to kind of understand that. But you can't even talk to your players about something that's not in place.
Right.
So everybody was asking us in recruiting, like, well, will your seniors come back or will they not come back? And I'm like, well, the rule's not in place, and it's not going in place. So sometimes that whisper around the world is true, and sometimes it's not. But I do think for us, getting that consistency will help all the coaches in the country.
Well, you brought me to my next point, because 5 years of eligibility for all players is kind of the thing right now in college sports that is circling. How do you proceed even if that rule isn't in place right now? It could be in a month, 2 months, 3 months. How do you proceed with recruiting and building your own program?
You have to be able to get out in front of who's staying and who's not staying, is the way I look at it. I did the same thing, during as COVID went on, and you get to the spring, and then you get to name, image, and likeness, and you get to all the changes that you have. You're going to have to get some commitments from guys in the spring when they got one more year. Now you have one more year to go. Then you're saying, okay, now you have 2 more years to go, right? Because it's going to change. And if that's the case, will you be staying? I think if you wait for them to finish the year to get an answer, that's hard, man. That leaves you in the balance right there. And I think that's hard. I think it's going to be something that we did a couple years ago, with Mason Gillis and Ethan Morton. It was just, hey, we'll hold your scholarship if you want it. Yeah. But if you don't want it, both of them had already graduated. One of them had already had their master's. The other one had been already worked on his master's. Yeah. So we're like, no, we're going to be done. We're going to be done here. Ethan didn't play as much and, wanted to play. And he had a good experience at Colorado State. Mason was somebody that was ready to go professionally. Financially, it made more sense for him to stay in college. This was, his 6th year of college, because he redshirted his first year at our place. So that was a little bit different, but we just discussed it with them and said, like, hey, take 2-3 weeks. And both of them said, no, we're not going to come back. Then things changed to their defense, right? You're asking them to make a decision. And then 11 months later, you feel differently. And so rightfully so. So that's something I think is going to have to come in play, because if you go that 5-5 and you wait to the spring and to hear answers from people, man, that's going to be difficult in recruiting.
Are you and your coaching colleagues indifferent about the 5-year rule, or do you feel like you would rather just get an answer just to know what the rules are so you can operate by them?
Yeah, I would like to hear it. I'm not in the rooms as much anymore. I'm on the NABC, executive council, but I am not on the men's basketball oversight committee anymore. And that's what I enjoyed about being in there. And that's what I always talk to coaches about is
Right.
you get everybody's perspective, and it's good, before you get to
Yeah.
your opinion, you want all the facts. And now you get it from a faculty rep, you get it from an athletic director, you get it from an assistant commissioner, you get a lot of different people speaking on things. And it really kind of sets what you think is best. So I like to hear who's pushing it. Like,
Yeah.
like what's the benefit here? What do we really get from this? Because we talked about waivers and we talked about eliminating all those things. You're never going to eliminate those.
Right.
After all the hoops we've jumped through here the last 5-6 years, that's come to be pretty commonplace, is that you can't stop somebody from having a waiver. You can't stop somebody from suing you, whatever it might be. So I think that's going to be really important. And I think that's where coaches kind of get upset with things, is that the communication line, especially nationally, is like, why can't we get to where we can come together and talk about things? And just because you're not on a committee, like, you need to have a voice. And that's so important. Sometimes it just gets communicated within those groups, but it needs to be communicated with everybody. They're like, well, talk to your ADs and talk to your administrators and talk to them. Well, they don't know at times either. And so like that communication has to be better or be existent. I mean, I think, like, once you start to really think about like what's important in our sport, we kind of get it on the back end, and then we react to it instead of the work that very few people are doing together. Why can't we collectively do that work together? And then you hear a lot of different opinions to get there. You can't please everybody. If you go into those things in college, that's why you've talked about it, like having a czar, having a commissioner, having somebody rule on somebody who's qualified, I think would really, really help our sport.
Well, Matt, let's get to basketball right now. You had a great season last year, went to the Sweet 16, second week into the NCAA tournament, and you did it with a different makeup than Purdue is used to. What was it like playing a little bit smaller, even if it was out of necessity?
Oh, it was fun on offense.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun on offense. I think you see people flourish just because Trey Kaufman-Ring can pass the ball. Braden Smith can really pass the basketball. So you got your high usage guys that are passers, and it's always fun to play with guys like that. Fletcher Loyer is the best shooter in the country. He really benefits, from that. He gives us so much space to be able to play, and then trying to put skill around all those guys. But with that being said, we did not have rim protection. We weren't a great defensive rebounding team. We were very efficient offensively. We were great in transition. We just didn't have a high enough volume in transition because we didn't rebound as well. We did force turnovers defensively. But I think now we're going to have a balance where we can play a couple different ways. We can play that way, but we also can play bigger, with the size that we have with Daniel, being healthy, and, and Oscar, coming on board.
Trey Kaufman-Ren had an All-American caliber season last year, was really gifted around the rim finishing. What changes for him now as he maybe transitions from the 5 to the 4 offensively?
Yeah, just, I think being a better rebounder at that spot, I think is what, should jump out. And, and having somebody who can be more of a rim protector, and then he can, play the 4. I think he's going to do a lot of the same things, but having him there, and like I said earlier, just being a great decision maker and a guy that can play in that short role, can do a lot of different things, whether he's driving the basketball or posting the basketball. But he's worked really hard. He's put himself in a great position.
When you're at parties, sometimes they pass around the hors d'oeuvres and you get a sample of something that they're serving. I feel that's kind of like what America got to Daniel Jacobsen. It was a pig in a blanket, or a lamb chop or something like that. And he was really good in the one game that he played. He's a forgotten man in a lot of ways nationally, because he was going to be an integral part of Purdue's operation, and he played a game and change. What are realistic expectations for Daniel Jacobsen now and what will be his first full season of college basketball?
Yeah, that's a good question. He's gained weight. He's up to about 250. Just the experience and getting healthy and being with USA Basketball back-to-back years. Anytime you have those experiences, I think it helps your confidence. His was kind of twofold because of the injury, just getting back out there. He didn't play as much in the 19 and unders, and rightfully so. Marez Johnson is a really good player, very talented, great rebounder. So he was in there, and shared some time with Marez, and he played more the first games in the U18. So just doing the same things, blocking shots, running. We throw a lot of lobs to him. Oscar is more physical. Oscar is more rugged. Oscar is more of a back to the basket guy. Daniel's more of a flip up guy, kind of living in the dunker, just causing problems with his length.
Anytime people are going to talk about Purdue, they're going to talk about Braden Smith, who's obviously the early favorite to be the National Player of the Year. He was sensational last season. What is it like for you to watch the evolution of somebody's career who maybe wasn't the highest rated guy coming in, but was the starting point guard on a 1 seed as a freshman and is now in position to obviously be a first-team All-American and maybe the National Player of the Year as a senior?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like, once again, he's worked very hard. Those three guys that led us last year with Fletcher, Braden, and Trey, like all those guys have worked really hard. They put themselves in great position. Braden is just such a good, passer. He's got great basketball instincts on both ends of the court, and just makes other people better. And, his ability to pass, his ability to score and keep people honest. I think that balance, that growth as a scorer has really, really helped. Because if they have to worry about him scoring, that just opens up more things for him from a passing standpoint.
Now, the NCAA could obviously change the rule at any minute, and kids could get an extra year of eligibility. But if the time comes where this season represents the senior day for Braden Smith, Fletcher Loyer, and Trey Kaufman-Renn, how emotional is that going to be for Matt Painter?
Well, it's a sad day, anytime you have great players. It's one thing to have like talented guys, but what we've strived to do is, and I mentioned a little bit, is have like what some NBA teams have with that corporate DNA. And it's hard because it's hard to keep players together, that nucleus of players together in the NBA, just like it is in college now. Very, very hard to keep 3-4 main pieces together and grow for 4 years. Obviously, Trey redshirted his first year, so now they're in the same class. But it's going to be a sad day because those guys make the plays work.
Which returning player for Purdue has made the biggest jump since the end of last season?
Oh man, they've all improved. Like the guys that I've talked about, they've all like worked and gotten better. I think the guys that make the most jumps a lot of times in a program are the freshman to sophomore jumps. So like CJ Cox, Jakari Harris, like, they had learning curve. Daniel obviously got hurt. So they had that learning curve. We have a kid that redshirted, Jack Benner. That's played really well in the summer and the fall. So, we'll see. Not all of them have the same runway. And that's what's tough in our business today when you do return people now trying to kind of get that role definition with those other spots in there. Sometimes there's not 25 minutes and 30 minutes. So sometimes you don't see it as much. Obviously, when those guys leave, there's going to be more runway there. I think you'll see some people really, really make some jumps there just because of the opportunity.
And which newcomer do you think makes the biggest impact for Purdue in 25-26?
Oscar will give us the rebounding. That's where we needed the most. We needed rebounding the most. Antoine West has really played well. Omer Meyer has played well. Liam Murphy can really shoot the basketball. Man, you're one of those guys that you're just kind of shocked when he misses. So all they've done well. Like they've all adjusted to it a little bit different. Liam is 23 years old. Oscar's 23 years old. Yeah. The other two guys are 18, 19 years old. So they're very, very young, even though Omer has a lot of professional experience and a lot of high level experience there. But we'll see. We'll kind of see how things have gone. We didn't have a complete team. It's kind of hard for me to answer. It was the first summer we haven't had a complete team. We had some visa issues. We had guys playing in Daniel and Omer and those guys playing in games. So not everybody was with us this summer. Liam and Raleigh Burgess both missed the whole summer because they were coming off surgeries. So, that piece of things kind of held us back a little bit, but we've had everybody together here in the fall, and it's been really good.
And this, brings to the interesting question of how deep can a rotation be when you're in the guts of the Big Ten and in the guts of obviously a very difficult non-conference schedule. And I remember when I was at one of your practices a couple of years ago in West Lafayette, and you pointed at somebody and you said, we have to redshirt that guy because he's too good not to redshirt. And it was Trey Kaufman-Renn.
Right.
How deep can Purdue's rotation be in 25-26?
Yeah, as deep as you want it to be, but obviously, as coaches get you, as the season progresses, the one thing that sometimes people don't understand about like rotations are, the deeper you get in your rotation, people goes, man, I really like that depth. If something happens, it really helps you. Foul trouble, injuries, things of that nature, it really helps you. But if it doesn't, you stay out of foul trouble, you don't have injuries,
right.
You're playing your best players less if you play more people. So you got to keep that in perspective. Like you want Trey Kaufman-Renn and Fletcher Laurier and Braden Smith on the court less. And people always say, I'd take them out and like rest them and do stuff. And I get it. Like I get it. But if you've ever coached your own team, you kind of like seeing those guys on the floor, especially together, because collectively they do really well together.
And that troika, Smith, Lawyer, and Kaufman-Renn, to me, it's completely unique as you cover it in terms of really, what we've seen in the history of the game, because they have been through everything in college basketball.
Right.
They've dealt with the brutal March Madness loss. They've had the epic March Madness wins. Do you teach those kids more about life when they lose to Fairleigh Dickinson as a 1 seed or when they go to the title game and play UConn for a national championship the next year?
Yeah, and you throw in the Houston loss.
Yeah,
and put ourselves in a really, really good position because when we played Auburn 3 months before that, like we wanted nothing to do with that. Like Auburn was so far ahead of us.
Right.
The only time in the last 5 years we've been overwhelmed. We've gotten beat before. We've gotten beaten sound before, but we haven't been overwhelmed. Like we were overwhelmed in that game. And that was our goal at the end of that game, is to say, hey, when we play somebody of that caliber again, that 1 seed, which was Houston, like, can we be ready? And I thought our guys were ready. But to answer your question, that's when you put yourself in a great position and then have a catastrophic loss, when you put yourself in another great position and then you make a great run, you like you said, you learn a lot, about yourself. Like you learn, we thought we got some tough calls at the end of the Houston game. Like now, can we still be professional, still push on? Because it's tough to take. It's like when you put yourself in great positions and then you have failure, it is really, really hard to take. But that's part of this racket, and you got to be able to deal with it. And you always got to find a silver lining, until it's over.
Matt,
hopefully we found those silver linings in some of those losses and some of those experiences.
Yeah, you got to ride the wave when you coach in the NCAA tournament. I remember I was at a Syracuse practice years ago, and Jim Boeheim was saying, like, if you do this 40 years, you're probably not going to win every game you should. And that brings me to my next question, because I remember at a Syracuse practice years ago, and this was a really fascinating back and forth. Jim Boeheim was just talking about once you go to a Final Four, you obviously want to win a national championship, and that's the dream and goal of every coach. But once you go to a Final Four and you get that week honeymoon of media interviews and get-togethers and, pregame festivities with alumni, that's the only thing that matters as a coach. Now that you've achieved that a couple of years ago and you went through that in 2024, does getting back to a second Final Four resonate even more maybe than it did going the first time?
Yeah, no question, because your expectations as a coach is your best season.
Yeah.
And if you keep that in play, so like for us, like we've done everything besides win a national championship. So that's what it's going after. We've been the runner-up national champs. We've won our league. We've won the tournament. We've had success in non-conference. We went 3 straight years without losing a non-conference game. If we're preseason number 1, we've been number 1 in the country at some point 4 out of the last 5 years. So like we've been able to sustain excellence and being able to push through and do a lot of things. But you still haven't done that big thing and win a national championship. So that's always going to sit there, and it should sit there. Like something should drive you, but that's driving everybody. That doesn't separate you. You still got to go out there and earn it and win 6 games in a row.
Matt, I know you don't have Zach Edey on your roster this year, but as we've referenced, you do have 86% of your scoring back from a Sweet 16 team. Considering that, is this the best chance you've had as a head coach to win a national championship?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because with the team that we have now, something can happen and we can still be pretty good. Like your margin of error sometimes when you lose some people can fall off. Like we fell off a little bit, even though we had a good year last year. We fell off when Daniel, our margin of error was a little thinner than it was in the past. Now, if something happens of that magnitude, it doesn't mean if we lose one of those key guys that we've missed that it's not going to affect us, because it is. But we still have enough to be able to push forward and still compete against elite people.
And this brings to me now the interesting point for you on how to manage, obviously, the mental aspect of this season for a core that obviously has been together now for a while. When you start the season 4 weeks from today on November 3rd, you're not guaranteed to be the number 1 seed in the Midwest and have the path back to Indianapolis. How do you keep a group sharp for obviously the regular season,
right,
and the conference tournament slate during that week for the Big Ten tournament, when you know obviously this group is ultimately thinking about starting the NCAA tournament and trying to win 4 games to get back to Lucas Oil?
Yeah, no matter what the situation is, like move to the next game. If you have a big win or you have a tough loss, move to the next game. Learn from it, and don't get caught up in that. This is our goal. This is what we want to do. We want to put ourselves in the best situation. But even if you don't put yourself in the best situation, it still doesn't mean you can't get to your ultimate goal. So it's not the end all be all, but when you start thinking past the next game, that's when you're going to have trouble.
Have you brought up with your team the topic of staying in the state of Indiana and going down the road 70 miles to play in the Final Four?
Sure. Yeah. We've discussed it. And I think that was what I told them, was I didn't discuss it enough about trying to get to a Final Four last year, because we win that game against Houston. We're playing Tennessee, to go to a Final Four, in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And so it was there, it was there for us. And it's something I should have talked about a lot more than I did. And it's something that we'll talk about. I'm a big believer in, talking things into existence. You got to have everybody on the same page, but you also have to have enough. There's times where you start a season where you can talk about it, but deep down, you don't have enough. And that's what makes it feel good now, that I think our staff has done a really good job of putting all the pieces together.
Well, you played for a national championship in 2024. What are the biggest keys for this rendition of Purdue to be in a similar situation in 2026?
Defense and rebounding. I think we've improved it with the personnel that we've added and the experience that we have, but you still have to go out and be consistent in those areas. We have to be consistent in those areas, because if we can defensive rebound, we're going to have a lot of good opportunities in transition. But then defensively, we all know that the ball doesn't go in every night. Right. You've got to be able to grind out some wins. You got to be able to not be at the top of your game and still be quality people. And I think that's always a good sign of a championship level team, is when you can, not make shots and still defend and rebound and be able to pull out that tough victory.
Matt, appreciate a couple minutes. Going to be a lot of fun to cover your team, as always. Know how busy you are. All the best with the Cubs in the postseason. All the best with the rest of the preseason for Purdue. And as always, look forward to staying connected along the way.
All right, man. Thank you.
You got it. That's Purdue head coach Matt Painter. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now.